Good morning and welcome back to Planet Old History. Today we are going to discuss what if Germany turned communist and Russia fascist. Communism and fascism are very broad terms, and very often people consider National Socialism, for instance, to be part of fascism, while others claim it may be more left-wing and thus closer to communism. Communism is sometimes also used as synonym for Marxism or socialism. To sum it up, the words communist and fascist will be used in a very simplistic way, without entering into too many details. I also don't want to enter debate what is fascism, what is communism. I just want to keep this scenario as easy and as coherent as possible. Now, some of you may ask, why this title? Why a communist Germany and a fascist Russia at the same time? Well, because both countries and both ideologies are very linked together. When the Reds or the Bolsheviks won the Russian Civil War, people in Europe and even in the US were very afraid of communism. There was a red paranoia going on. Not only liberal democracies but also anti-democratic ideologies such as fascism were against the communists. Both ideologies competed in some way or another for the same voting group. Moreover, fascism and communism were suitable ideologies for a radical change. Many people felt a need that there needed to be a change, and it was imminent. Fascism as well as communism provided the solution. While communism was more coherent, structured, and had more ideologists working on it, fascism wasn't that coherent, and even until nowadays there are debates what actually consists fascism. What is it? When communism got stronger, so got fascism and related ideologies, and as a result there was a huge divide among people in Europe. Due to the Bolsheviks winning the Russian Civil War, we can also claim that this was a reason why the Nazis got so much support in Germany and why the appeasement policy was promoted by Britain to a lesser degree. And well, the rest is history. But what if all of that changed? What if Germany turned communist and Russia fascist? Well, first of all, we need to discuss the possibility of a change within the White Army. The White Army was too decentralized, too disorganized, and even with that said, the Whites gave the Reds a very hard time. But we won't find a consensus within the White Army. Perhaps after a White victory and after some more years we can get a coherent ideology in the ruling class. So, there is another point of divergence that I propose, and that is that Trotsky is killed. This means that the Bolsheviks are without a strong military leader such as Trotsky, and the White Army could thus be able to get some more victories. Without going into too many details, the White Army would win around the same time as the Red Army did. The government would be complicated. I believe, in my opinion, that the White Army would set up some type of council, a military council, where the generals, they would actually set up the rules and govern the whole country, and the army would become very important. We would get some type of military dictatorship. The generals would very often agree with each other, but they would agree on important issues such as getting the monarchy back and making an all-unified Russia. Russia would still get the same borders as the Soviet Union in OTL did, and the minorities would still be treated badly due to an increased effort of Russification. But we would see less deportations going on. Seeing how a united Russia would be necessary and how even the Tsar wasn't able to unite Russia and even Russify it, the next generation of leaders around 1925 would set up their own type of ideology, and, well, monarchy would already be seen as something unnecessary. People like Severin Dobrovolsky at first could define a Russian type of fascism without calling it fascism at first, but later down the line they would agree that this is indeed the Russian version of fascism. And then seeing how he, Konstantin Rodzaevsky, Anastasy Wozniacki and Lev Okhotin supported fascist policies, we could get closer ties with Italy, but also with the Orthodox Church for very practical reasons. Perhaps even China could become an ally, but, well, this is something I'm unsure about. At the end, Russian fascism would be about an all-Russian state, a Russia that includes at least all of Belarus, Ukraine, and to some degree the Baltics, Finland and Poland, and a Russia that serves as some kind of a third Rome with the Orthodox Church next to it, and having smaller allies such as Serbia, Romania or Bulgaria beneath it. Germany could see radical changes if the Whites could manage to win, if not already around the end of World War I, at least with the elections in the end 20s or in the beginning of the 30s, the KPD, Kommunistische Partei Deutschlands, would come in power, alone or in a coalition with the Social Democrats, because Stalin wouldn't exist in this timeline and they would be able to make a coalition if they wanted to. If the communists would successfully set up a government immediately after World War I, it would be heavily contested and Germany would enter a civil war as well. If the communists would win as a party in an election in the 30s, the liberal democracies wouldn't do much about it and Germany would be more intact. The German communists would still follow similar foreign policies to the Nazis, but with a different excuse. Of course, they would see the Treaty of Versailles as something very imperialist, and their second goal is, of course, to spread the world revolution. Russia would become an ally to Italy. Spain would fall to the Republicans and become loosely allied to the Germans, who supported the Republicans in the Spanish Civil War. World War II could start in different way, maybe with an invasion of Poland, an early invasion of France, or the Italians not allowing the Germans to annex Austria, but I believe an invasion of Poland would be the kickstarter and the Russians could happily take back what rightfully belonged to their little Ukrainian and Belarusian brothers, while the Germans would call it a first step towards the world revolution, and the other motivation would of course be to nullify the Treaty of Versailles, a treaty done by the imperialists. And moreover, Poland was a fascist power and a fascist oppressor to the German minority. This isn't going well, and thus Germany has to do something about it. Britain would of course declare war, as would France too, but this time around France would even be more reluctant, just what Ernst Thälmann had hoped for. Yes, the French, they had deep sympathies for left-wing policies in the end of the 30s, and thus the French, they would not even invade the Saarland as they did in OTL. Scandinavia would be taken for strategic reasons, and Germany would request Irish assistance in a potential war against Britain, which the Irish this time around would accept as they had more left-wing sympathies. Japan and Russia, they could have concluded a non-aggression pact and both would not like each other, but become each other's end goal eventually. Russia, Hungary, well, Horthy would still be in charge, and Italy would divide the Balkans. Italy taking, for instance, Albania, Slovenia, Croatia and parts of Bosnia, while the Hungarians, they would take some parts of Romania And the Russians, they would also take some parts of Romania, but at the same time influence Serbia and Bulgaria. Greece could be elevated as an important member of this alliance, much to the opposition of Italy, and this would bring in a conflict later on between Russia and Italy. The Benelux would be taken as well, and France may be taken even faster in OGL. Collaboration with the Germans in France could be much higher this time around, seeing how communism was something different than National Socialism. The Spanish would occupy some French territories after the capitulation of France, and they would get motivated to take out Portugal as well, and Andorra too, due to the communist goal of having a united communist Iberia, and them seeing Germany winning the war against the Allies. Thus Britain would not be able to do anything about it, and Gibraltar too would be taken out. Britain would be beaten and have problems with supplies from the Mediterranean, given the fact that the Spanish would take Gibraltar. The Irish would take Northern Ireland, and the Germans would have successful operations from Norway, Denmark, Benelux and France invading the UK. The Russians would take out Finland eventually, and Turkey would fall under immense pressure from the Russians and the Greeks. Turkey would suffer a similar fate as Poland, and Kurdistan would become a fascist satellite state to the Russians. The Brits would loosely ally themselves with the Russians, hoping to win them as a potential ally against the Germans. And they would also ask the US to eventually intervene. And just as the Brits had hoped for, a war between the Germans and Russia was imminent. The communist German reasoning behind it would be to eliminate fascism after having eliminated imperialism, embodied by the British Empire, the French and the Treaty of Versailles, while the Russians would want to take what was part of Congress Poland and to stop the Red Menace. Remember, many of the Russian elite in this timeline would have fought against the Bolsheviks and thus have no sympathies whatsoever for the communists. The Germans would have their troops overstretched, but so would Russia. At first, the Germans could make important and crushing victories, only to be stopped by the US in the Western Front. And the Russians, they too would, with the US in the combined effort, be able to crush the Germans. Italy too would invade and free Austria as a power that guaranteed the independence of Austria and move deep within Bavaria. But what would be the reasoning of the US intervening in this war? They would have three reasons for it. Communism is the first one. The second one is the Brits asked them for help, and the US would prefer having the Brits being around in Europe instead of having just communist or fascist powers. And the US would fear a too strong fascist Russia. So instead of giving the Russians or the Germans everything they wanted in Europe, the US would then intervene and help out the Brits and also the Portuguese. Complicated and dangerous operations would be launched in Iceland, Ireland and Portugal. Iberia would be the weak link, while the Irish would give up after some battles, and the Americans would be seen as liberators in Britain. The only place that would be against it would, I think, be Scotland, but they too would be beaten very quickly. After hard, fierce battles, Russian and American troops would meet in Germany. The four powers in this timeline would be Russia and Italy, as well as the US and Britain. Germany would again be divided in 4 occupation zones, and peace would be restored in Europe. Russia would agree to let certain states become independent again, but grow distant from Italy. Italy would be forced to give up certain claims, but they could keep some colonies, and Austria would become indeed some type of Italian satellite state. Russian and Italian fascism would see a split similar to the Sino-Soviet split, and Italy would become a very loose ally to the West with the whole bloc. Western Germany could then be created with the union of the Italian, British and American occupation zone, while the Russian occupied East would become a militaristic and nationalistic German state. Would Russian fascism be a viable system? Or would Russia eventually collapse together with its bloc and allies, like Greece for instance? And what about the Turks? Will they be able to free themselves? And that's where we leave it for now. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetoldhistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Old History.